I want to introduce you to the first speaker today. So, in from Copenhagen, we have Nicklas Larsen. He's a senior advisor at the non-profit think tank Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies, where he's responsible for art, culture, education, and philanthropy. And he will talk a little bit more about the future and how we can utilize that in our thinking. Welcome to Nicklas.
Thank you, Martin. Oh, wow. I'm so surprised to see that so many is in this room right now. I've been sitting here with the back to you all for a minute. I'm happy to see you. When I walked here in the rain, I was scared that nobody would show up, but here we are. Future mediums of creative expression. In my practice, it's all about anticipating futures. And what I'm going to talk about the next 15, 20 minutes is how to use the future, not as a destination, but as a process to inform what we do today. And what I'm going to talk about is first a little bit of theoretical groundwork around uncertainty and anticipation and what we call futures literacy. And then I'm going to give you 4 examples of how the future is used in different ways, different mediums of using the future. I tend to get a little bit excited around these topics, so bear with me. Please raise questions in the Q&A afterward if that is needed. First, I want to give some context to the notion of anticipating futures. First, I want to say that it's actually a part of nature and biology. We can observe anticipation even on a cellular level. It's an act of rebellion. Every time we imagine something different, new, we break the status quo. We essentially become what I like to call gentle activists. It's also a privilege. The way of using the future has been at the hands of the few for many years, for many decades. Since future studies became a discipline, we're now seeing that it is democratizing in many other ways. One reason is that we are starting to acknowledge that anticipating and using the future can encourage us to learn in times of complexity, which these are. And then the last point, it can allow us to embrace uncertainty. And we live in an uncertain world, but our brains and our systems are not wired for it. There is no shortage of articles out there from credible sources that will tell you why your brain is not wired for uncertainty. Thank you, Martin. Perhaps this is one of the biggest design flaws in the human experience because there's only one constant in the world, and that is change. Uncertainty is simply a fact of life. So what if we turned it around and accepted it and actually started to look at uncertainty as a feature rather than a bug? So stay with me here. Because creativity requires requires the courage to let go of certainty. As a clever man from Germany once said, we need friction. Over the years, we've been told that we need to live seamless lives. Everything needs to be easy. We need to slide from one platform to another platform. The way to the airport needs to be seamless. How we experience our daily life needs to be an easy experience. We've forgotten the power of friction. We need friction in our everyday life. Friction is where when we meet resistance, that's where we stop, we think, we create, we press ourselves into new ways of thinking, essentially. Think of it this way. You are probably gonna remember during your holiday the time where there was a power shortage, a blackout or something, and you had to go to the fire pit and make a fire and fry your fish there instead of doing it on the pan. That's the story you tell when you come back to the office, right? Try to work with that analogy because this type of resistance, creative friction, is needed in our processes. Type 2 fun, we also like to call it, the things that are fun afterwards. Now, this was like a segue into my practice, which is revolving around futures literacy, which regards anticipatory systems and processes. We as humans have 3 overarching ways of using the future as a medium, if you will. The first two ones is where we go autopilot. Here we plan for optimization. We optimize things that exist. Or the second one, we prepare for contingency. We prepare something, we protect something that exists. Sorry. This is where we autopilot. We do this all the time. What we we're ought to train and become better at is affording ourselves the space to explore new things and open ourselves up to emergence, cultivate systems thinking, and actually sit back and observe our complex universe and see uncertainty as a resource rather than something that is bad. When we and I design futures literacy experiences and practices, there are a range of design principles that we use. And this is just to say that there is both very low-tech ways of exploring uncertainty, and some of the examples that I'll get back to is probably on the more high-tech scale. We reveal our assumptions, our biases, and our worldviews in order to stretch the imagination, to expand the room of conversation and thinking and speculation. Then we use reframes, we use prompts, scenarios, bizarre, absurd futures that are invoking emotions in us, which is information. Holding that together with our revealed assumptions allow us to rethink how we look at the present in a new way. So we essentially get a new pair of glasses to see things in a different way. And then it's up to us how to use that information in terms of how we want to react. So if you ever were to explore how to cultivate futures literacy as a creative process, remember, reveal, reframe, rethink, and maybe react. Now, let's get into the 4 different examples that I have where we look at the future as a medium of creative expression in 4 different ways. The future is often something that is written. Scenarios are written down. But might we stand a better chance at understanding what the future has to offer or what the future needs from us if it was lived, experienced, touched, sensed? Experiential futures is a new discipline in the larger discipline of future studies, where we bring the future to life, essentially. You could look at the experiential futures ladder here, where you go from the very abstract scenario, the future of something, and then you work your way down to get more and more detailed until you have a tangible product from that particular future. So this can be very visceral and evoke emotions. It can be intellectually built on data, and most often it's very speculative. We create products or designs or things that does not exist but tells us about a potential future. You need to approach experiential futures from 3 different angles. You need your design, you need your foresight, and you need your storytelling. So these are the 3 core ingredients that you need to have in place. And when we look at the Inheritance Project, for instance, here we can see a beautiful set of jewelries that were handed down from generation to generation. But what this tries to tell us is a story of nuclear waste, because these jewels cannot be touched for another 10,000 years. So this is a speculative artwork, a physical product that tells us about deep time, a concept we as humans really struggle with and have a hard time to fathom. Then there's another outlet, which is called sci-fi prototyping, that is emerging. I don't think these commercial companies, NATO, the UN, and so forth, have much else in common than exactly sci-fi prototyping. These different organizations have started to use sci-fi as a means of creating stories, alternative futures, and see how their product, their business model, their premise might turn out in a given future. Intel, for instance, out here is exploring how machines' devices are disappearing and becoming spatial. How are we going to use microchips in the future, for instance? NATO is exploring warfare in 2036, and the UN called in Kim Stanley Robinson to speak to them from the future, to tell them how might society look like on the other side of climate change? We interviewed him in our magazine and we asked him, what can you contribute that the world's foremost scientists cannot? And he says 3 things. The future as a subject for speculation, the combination of all the fields into a holistic vision of civilization, and lastly, narrative as a mode of knowing. Then we have speculative design. You have probably seen this one before, but it is one of the better visualizations of how we have started to take speculation more seriously. The axis goes here from constrained to unconstrained. I'm brought up in strategic foresight, which use the future for strategic purposes over here. I have, over the last couple of years, turned my practice into the more unconstrained, working with the future as a creative process in artistic realms. So what might that look like? Here we have the Vault of Life set in 2071 by Superflux at the Museum of the Future in Dubai that is seeking to combat climate in action. And it tells us about potential future extinct species and unique species that are still with us in this future. So a room you can enter in a museum to get a sense of a possible future to invoke action. Another one you might have seen is Matsuda's Hyperreality, where he created a speculative video where he puts a digital layer onto the physical realm in a, as it says here, technology run amok. How could that look like when AR is getting rampant all over the place and you have to navigate commercial pieces in your physical realm with the digital layer? Here he's at level 4 in his job, monkey level 4, it says. And the last example I'm going to give you is how we are seeing that data is not only being visualized in creative ways, we're also seeing a new tendency to dramatize it. So experiences that bring people together around data in social contexts. Here we have Jakob Lacour's studio, one artist that I find incredibly amazing. He's really pushing the boundaries of what technology can do in performance. Here he's having a stage practice where he used AI to guide a shamanic performance ceremony. So here the AI, very much like Yacht, is a part of unfolding the play on stage. So as Liam Young says here, the speculative architect, data dramatization as opposed to data visualization presents a data set with not only legibility but clarity in such a way that it provokes an empathetic or emotive response in its audience. And coming to an end here, this is various ways that you can see the future used as a process rather than a destination to inform what we do in the present. And that is what futures literacy is all about. It's about connecting the long term, speculating in the long term, but connecting it to the short term. What we can see when we do these processes is that our students, participants, and everything in between, they get a sense of enhanced perception. They get a broader view, essentially. They also start to embrace complexity as something neutral that you can get important information out of. And then they gain a new sense of agency by connecting the long term to the short term. And as Irene says here from Future Everything, a UK participatory futures agency, I see art-led futures thinking as a form of gentle activism. One of my favorite quotes. And lastly, I just want you to remember that the present moment used to be an unimaginable future. Thank you.